The Long Way Home, Chapter 22. Exhale. The Long Way was never fully silent. She hadn't been since the reactor was brought online on the day of her first commissioning. And though she'd seen many perils, she'd never been required to fully go cold. So far as Vincent knew, anyway. And he'd spent long hours going through her logs after he'd liberated her and given her a new name and legitimate transponder codes. It wasn't that he'd ever had anything against smugglers per se, but the pirates who looted her from her previous owners were the sort to have little compunction for killing folks for short-term gain. It had been handy for Vincent, though, since then her engines, her reactor, her gravity generator, her hyperdrive, her life support systems, and all of the little creaks and pops she made as she sailed through the void and the hyperspace sea had been his constant companion. He'd always found those sounds reassuring, even after the past 4 days of torment. Now, though, now that he could find sleep, however fitful, and assailed by nightmare and worry, now that his head only sometimes mildly throbbed, it had a triumphal quality, even in her near-silent landed mode. But she had changed. Since he'd taken command of her, and so had he, she had been a companion in his grief, and he had been little more than a vengeful revenant cursed with a still-beating heart and doomed to be ever reaching for a forlorn hope of finding who he'd lost, or vanishingly unlikely death in battle against the forces of evil. Like Tantalus, he strove to reach for the sublime, and he was drawn ever further, and the space receded from even his lowly grasp. But still he persisted. It had been rewarded. There was laughter between the bulkheads the long way now. Laughter, and jokes, and exasperated sighs, and ill-tempered shouts, and petty arguments, and deep questions, and all the things that Vincent had been sure he'd never have again. Here and now, before a man broken upon the wheel of capricious fate, to grasp once again. Gnarled alien trees with purplish broad leaves swayed in the wind of an alien world above vast fields of some kind of vibrant green creeping shrub, covering rolling hills in the dazzling light of an alien sun, and Vincent held himself fortunate, however temporarily, to have had whatever small part of these children's lives that God permitted him to share in. He'd sat down in the lee of one of these low, rolling hills that overlooked the wider river shaking through the hills and shallow valleys, with a lazy grace that no doubt belied its might. On the windward side, a cluster of gnarled trees grew, and in the distance the hills began to rise into the foothills of low, rounded purplish and green mountains, dotted with the occasional gray of exposed stone. It seemed to Vincent like a fine place to camp out for a few days. There was, however, tension amidst his charges. The George boy was cooking up something, probably something to lift morale. Trondre was in on whatever he was thinking over, and was spending more time in the engine room working on a project. Cadet clearly had thought of a question that he was screwing himself up to ask. Isis Magdalene had puffy eyes and occasionally stared off with nothing, even when being included with the other girls, and little Vi was very clearly feeling the strain. A few days where none of the kids needed to take shifts on the bridge, a few days when everyone could relax and have fun, and a few days where anybody who needed space wouldn't have such a hard time finding it seemed a good notion. The first problem was the noble girl. She'd been through a damn mangle, and Vincent didn't exactly know what to do about that. But he guessed he ought to try anyhow. Chit for a chat, the George boy asked from where he knelt to arrange stones in a ring for a fire pit. "Keep your chit," Vincent replied. "Chatting's free." "So, what's in your mind?" "Noble girl, she needs something." The George boy put another stone into place with a loud clack before he said, "Aye, something. Girls are different, though, and stuff that'd help you and me might not work for her." "Kid, maybe hold off on telling me how much you know about girls until after you're married," Vincent japed, before chuckling at his own humor. The chief didn't bother hiding his exasperation. "Ha ha, you're very funny. See how I laugh at your jokes? It's just, I'd wanted to work out something to do. I wanted to work out something to do when, Christ, in comms, when I was so afraid. But I don't know, doing something, even just washing up for dinner helps. When I remember what's happened to me. Mrs. Magdalene, she'll help out, I think, but I figure that won't be what she needs. Call it a gut feeling." Vincent grunted his agreement, and stones clacked against each other while the chief kept building a fire pit. "My wife," Vincent began, and his throat closed around the next words, so he had to cough before beginning again. My wife had a bad car wreck just before we met. She used to get nightmares about it, and even long after she'd gotten over it. So she said anyway. Sometimes she'd remember and, well, point is, it was my job to sit there and listen, and not try to think up any advice. I'll tell you now, never try to give a woman advice with her problems unless she actually asks for it. Anyway, I guess that Isis Magdalene might need something like that. Someone to listen without judging. What's the point of talking your problems over if you don't want help fixing them? The George boy asked incredulously. Kid, I was married to her for over a decade, and I never figured that out. A look of despair came over Jason as he said, I'd figured that girls would make more sense when I got older. Vincent chuckled at the kid's innocence and said, I'll be the one to deal with that. I can listen pretty good. It's talking I'm bad with. Yeah, well, the boy scoffed. I have something less crazy on my mind. And what is that? A party, the George boy kid stated simply. My birthday was 2 days ago, and the crew needs an excuse to celebrate. Vi's positively vibrating to figure out a way to make me a cake, and I think she still saw that Tran gave away her surprise party idea. Your birthday? Why didn't you say anything? Vincent said, just a little hurt. Truth be told, I forgot. It wasn't until Tran told me happy birthday that I did the math. That and, well, you were in the middle of something. You know, kid, sometimes it's right to think about yourself, Vincent grunted. I know, the boy replied. And catching Vincent's doubtful glance, he sniggered ruefully. I do know. It's just a small thing here, a little sacrifice there. Time for myself later somewhere else. And it starts to look like a whole lot like I don't. Except I always eat, I always sleep, and I always get my workout in. So I do know. I just realized, Vincent slowly said, I never asked you how old you are. 12 now. Tran's 10, going on 11 in 3 months. Vi said she's 9. I guess cadet's somewhere between me and Tran in age. But he never said. Ah, damn. I'm sorry, kid. Forgiven. And don't worry about it, the chief said as he began to stack kindling in the pit. I forgot, and it was my own birthday. Well, I'm game for a party. I don't know what exactly you'd like to do to celebrate, but, Jason smiled up at him and said, I don't need much. We just need to make it feel like a party for everyone else. I'll think of something, Vincent grunted, as his eyes fell to the shore where Isis Magdalene sat hugging her knees, while she watched Vi take darting leaps from placid waters of the wide river below. And then his eyes flicked up to the sky where cadets soared in the white pinions around their camping site. What happens when I get you home? Vincent asked. Well, you'll probably have to go on a tour to meet everybody. Service has a bunch of my aunties and uncles spread out. Most of my older cousins. Or maybe they'll come to meet us on account of getting home being a big deal and all. After that, you have some options. What do you mean, options? Well, how do you want to live? What do you want to do? Do you want to join one of the clan ships and embrace life after service? Do you want to find a new way to serve? Do you want to be close to Tran and me? Do you want to build connections with the rest of the family? How afraid of Nana are you? Vincent snorted at that last one. Afraid of Nana? Everybody's afraid of Nana, the boy said seriously. She's a force of nature. Leave questions for a boy of 12, Vincent remarked, leaving the question of grandmotherly wrath aside for a moment. I figure on that. But I heard men grown ask them over and over. And I figure I'll have to ask them myself one day. But not today, Vincent firmly told him. Not today, the George boy agreed brightly. Today, I'm a normal kid, looking forward to a normal party. Attaboy. Some half hour later, Jason climbed down the ladder to the engine room to see what was keeping Trundray indoors. He could see, as she descended, that she was hard at work assembling something. He figured on it being a gizmo of some sort, which was, of course, not much in the way of useful identification. So he asked, What are you working on, Tran? Jason was perturbed to see her shoulders slump as she sighed. I'm sorry, Jason, I got so absorbed in the sewing machine, I forgot about you. I figure I got more than any boy ought to ask for my birthday present, Tran. New friends, the family grows, and you're here to have my back all the way, he told her with a perfect solemn honesty. To Jason's relief, Trandra's shoulders firmed up, and he could hear a smile creep into her voice. I suppose those are good presents, but still. I know. Tell you what, if you decide that you have to make me a birthday present, we'll pretend that it wasn't late, deal? Jason offered, with a sly humor creeping into his voice and countenance. It's not so silly as you think, Trundray said defensively. It's important that, it's how I... Tran, I know, Jason told her gently. I know, and I appreciate it. Thanks, she said. I think this'll help with, Jason peered at the alleged sewing machine and said, I figured it'd help Mrs. Magdalene less like an outsider. Smart thinking, Tran. Except we're planetside, and you could do with a little fresh air. Plus Uncle Vincent says the party's on. Jason's cousin scowled at him and waggled a hand at him as she scolded. You could have started with the good news, you know. Aye, he agreed. But this is funnier. But outside, an alien sun was setting behind an alien horizon, painting a foreign sky in unfamiliar hues, as Vincent trudged down to the riverbed, where a young girl sat alone. Having failed to return the long way with Vi, he eased himself down on joints that felt creaky despite the lighter gravity, to the leafy creeping brush vines that carpeted the hill leading to the bank, and looked out to appreciate something he hadn't seen in a few decades. Think you that I should speak with you? Isis MacLean said, with tones of thawing frost. I'm not much for talking, but I can listen just fine, little lady. And what shall you do, should I wish not to speak at all? Listen to the silence, Vincent told her. For a good 10 minutes, the only sound passing between them was the gentle sound of the river lapping at its banks, and it seemed to Vincent that the girl was determined to test him. Then abruptly, Isis Magdalene said, My friends were taken with me. Their names were Jewel Terrasol, Nara Juna, and Dances Through Sorrow. We shared a dormitory room. We shared secrets. We passed judgment on which of the boys were pretty to behold together. We soothed homesick tears together. Yet now I remain, and they are memories now. It's hard to lose people, Vincent told her simply. Would that loss was all that I contended with. When the Corsairs came, did I show courage? Did I take command? Nay, I cowered beneath my blankets as a child weak in courage and wisdom, while my friends, Dancers Through Sorrow, stood mighty in courage and strove to defend Jewel Terrasol, Nera, Juno, and myself. Should that I eve a little of her might and courage, I might have, even, ere it useless, I should have strode and in our captivity, I could not lift the spirits of my friends. I could not devise a way to escape, and instead place my hopes and dreams in the breaker of chains coming from the pages of history to effect my rescue. Vincent rolled that around in his head for a bit before he said, Coming out to the other side of a pirate raid alive might be something like that, I guess. It's not an easy question. What if I'd done something different? But I guess there isn't much for a good answer. I haven't found one, anyway. I'll tell you this, though. If you weren't alive and whole, that ship of horror might have broke the chief. So, what I went through turns to the good? Isis Magdalene asked flatly. Nothing so simple, Vincent told her. I warned you, I'm better at listening than talking. I mean that even when things are at their darkest, sometimes there's enough to see by. Vincent nodded to himself, thinking that was a fine way of putting things. To see what? That you're still here. That you can carry the memories of your friends into the future. That you have the chance to grow. How you say it? Mighty in courage. The girl stared off into the dwindling light in silence for a long while before she said, I should like to return to the ship now. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.